you find that they look at the same.
Not necessarily tribal or regional.
But I have said that.
Welcome back to the show. This is a daybreak. If you missed our discussion segment, do well to go on our YouTube page to catch up on the conversation. And of course, it's time for us to take a look at the national dailies, some selected national dailies at this point, and we will start with the Daily Trust newspaper in-house. And we have a copy with Abdul at the moment. All right, I have a copy now. Let's start with the lead story on the Daily Trust newspaper this morning. It's a shouty one. It says Israeli forces kill 3,308 Palestinians. A very sad development there. There are riders here that might interest you. 500 killed at Gaza hospital. The second rider says 2,417 children, women among casualties. The last one says Palestinian President Jordan King cancel meeting with Biden.
Listen, I think as a human race, we should be ashamed of what's going on right now.
Exactly.
And unfortunately, it's signpost our inability to call a spade a spade. It's unacceptable. Deaths on any side. It's rather unfortunate to see that the world is divided on something so clear about exactly what the problem is and how we can solve these things.
And just like you mentioned, you know, it's a shameful act going on, because this action played out with Russia and Ukraine, and a lot of people laying there on the street were asking, can this country be called to other? That's a question that, you know, world leaders need to sit down and talk about. But that's the lead story this morning on the front page of a Daily Trust newspaper. Page 4 has that story. A very, very devastating, a pictorial there about what's happening as a result of the conflict between Israel and Hamas war. And yes, we have that in the front of a Daily Trust newspaper, and also some infographics there to give you a sense of what people are going through. And just above that, we have Biden must end Israel's war on Gaza. It seems Daily Trust dedicated the front page this morning to what is going on in Israel and Gaza.
I don't think the motivations of the United States are necessarily regarding ending it, because their position has always been Israel has a right to defend itself. And that in itself, they have this, air carrier that just moved in closer to Israel to provide military support. Unfortunately, the economics of war seems to support the argument that the military-industrial complex always welcomes development like this, because they get to sell their missiles, they get to sell arms and ammunition, and that's one part of the conversation that most people don't really see.
Shy away from it, and that's very, very sad.
Let's turn our attention now to the front page of the Daily Sun newspaper for today. Reps under fire over 130. Right, for today, is this... Okay, let's take a look at that story now. Storm in the Nigerian Senate as Ndume. Senate President Akpabio's rift deepen. Chief Whip stages walkout to protest Senate President's out-of-order ruling. Upper Legislative Chamber hurriedly goes into executive session. You have the unmistakable image of Senator Tambol and Senator Ojuzo Kalu there seated when they were there discussing. But in other news, Biden visits Israel today as Gaza humanitarian crisis worsens. Port Harcourt refinery repair, unrest, spare parts mismatch threaten December target. See? We can't even manage to do it correctly. Abia government denies asking northerners at Lopanta cattle market. Okay, denies asking them for what exactly? Okay, asking them to leave. That's the story. Read more on that on page 4. 63% of Nigerians living in poverty, according to Nigeria's finance minister and coordinating minister of the economy. President Todd launches cash transfer program for 15 million as palliatives. Now he said 63%, and I do remember the Minister of Humanitarian Affairs, Dr. Betta Edu, saying this 15 million households will target 63 million Nigerians. I wonder, is that just a coincidence?
How feasible is that?
I mean, we can debate the
Exactly.
whole social register, but then again, I think this figure is way off. 63%, I think it's a lot more than Nigerians. It's a lot more. Living in poverty, just 63%, I think the figure is a lot higher than that.
I think the middle class has now been
I think it goes without, it's a
demoted.
no-brainer. It's a no-brainer. And finally, on the Daily Sun, we're not responsible for violence in Southeast, according to IPOB.
All right, let's take a look at the Daily Times. The big story still shouted about the huge row in Senate between Ndume and Akpabio. Right, is that might interest you? Carry verbal exchange from plenary to execution session, and Chief Whip storms out of chamber and fury. Accuses Akpabio of disrespectful rules. All right, get those details on page 2 this morning, the Daily Times newspaper. Let's take a look at the masthead above the lead story now. We see Lagos, Kaduna generated enough IGR. A state's cumulative revenue hits 6.6 trillion naira. That's a report. And then the Rivers, Lagos, Anambra top physical performance ranking as Zamfara, Bayelsa, Benue lead from bottom. Our story started on the front page. I continue reading on page 3 of the Daily Times newspaper. Let's take a look at the bottom strip here. All right, we have pictorials of some of the vulnerable persons of beneficiaries of the cash transfer program, with Secretary to the Government of the Federation, George Akume, and with all the other members of the launch
program. Imagine going to the
program.
Aso Rock Villa for the first and possibly only time to collect a dummy check of 25,000 naira.
That's a discussion we'll have after this. But let's take a look at this one just below the pictorial. Resign due to fallout from opaque background. Ex-SGF Lawal tells Tinubu. All right, claims Obi came first and Tinubu third in February presidential poll. We will react shortly, APC says, and the last rider says the matter of who won is sub judice. That's coming from the People's Democratic Party.
I always marvel at politicians who say, like the former Secretary to the Government of the Federation, B.D. Lawan, he will tell you that Tinubu is his friend. And up until his nomination of Vice President Kashim Shettima, he was one of those people that campaigned for him. And then some of the things that they go on to say in the media about people they call their friends.
It's just hilarious if you ask me. But those are interesting riders that you might want to go further on. It's in the Daily Times. Take a look. And then we have Governor Lord's appeal court for sacking senator from his state. What senator they're talking about?
I think it's
page 10.
Elisha Abo from
Elisha,
Adamawa.
it's still lingering. It came up yesterday and then today, but get more details on that. And don't accommodate sell land to criminals. Legislators want Bauchi royal fathers. All right, get more details. And then LP flays 160 million naira car gift to lawmakers. And the last one we have here says governor's intervention over face-off among Akwa Ibom traditional rulers fails. And then we keep having this, not just in Akwa Ibom, you know, we have all of this panning out in different parts of the country. But that's all we have in the front page of the Daily Times newspaper for this morning.
Okay, let's turn attention now to the front page of the Nation newspaper as we wrap things up for the headlines. On the Nation newspaper, Aida Tiwa's impeachment on hold after APC's mediation. It is also alleged that the governor is now, he's not actually, in his official residence. He's gone to
He's in Ibadan, according to report.
Yeah, exactly. Labour Party tells its federal lawmakers to reject official vehicles. Will they? Remains to be seen. But the big story is talking about Edun, the Minister of Finance, saying that 84 million Nigerians living in poverty, not acceptable to Tinubu. So 84 million out of... Anyway, I think it's a lot more than that. Anyway, we will give Nigerians decent work, sustained social protection. 25,000 naira cash transfer begins, and it's going to last for 3 months. And you can see the presentation there of those dummy checks to some of the beneficiaries, marking the launch of the Renewed Hope conditional cash transfer. AFDB, ADF to bridge $42 billion financing gap for SMEs. Illegal exportation of gold, other solid minerals gone, says President Alaki. Says we will stimulate investment. And that is that on the front page of the Nation newspaper. Let's bring in our newspaper reviewer, Mr. Ben Sherman, former director of News Voice of Nigeria, is joining us this morning wearing black and not looking like his cheerful self. Good morning, Mr. Ben. Is it a
Thank
good
you
morning?
very much.
Is
The morning is
maybe
good. But,
what's happening, you know, it's really devastating. Yes, I understand.
Globally, people are not asleep peacefully.
Yeah. But isn't that always the case? That there's war, there's something destabilizing happening somewhere.
Yeah, but when
all the time.
Yes, there's always war. But sometimes when it comes of a very big magnitude, where humanity is involved, one cannot but begin to take some looks at sanctity of life.
What boggles you the most about this conflict? On the front page of the Daily Trust newspaper, the death toll is steadily rising day in, day out. The airstrikes keep happening, the attacks keep going on unabated. What is your... I mean, this is obviously not the first time this is happening, isn't it? But what are your thoughts about what's going on?
No, I think what is going on, I think let us call a spade, sanctity of life on both sides. Ceasefire, as far as I'm concerned. And what? I mean, you can't get via a fight. A handshake should be able to resolve that. But if you go deep into the history of this crisis, you need to go to Jerusalem and see how a melting pot it is, not just for the Jews, not just for the Christians, not just for the Muslims. Because if you look at the Temple Mount, it's a very huge foundation. You know this prophet Suleiman. He built that temple. But along the line, especially during the Ottoman Empire, that temple was destroyed. The Israelites were sent packing. So they were no longer in the Middle East. But somewhere along the line, there was this persecution here and there, and the Jews felt, why don't you trace back to where we came from? And in going back to that place, you could find people like Ben Gurion trying to kind of create a niche for the Israelites. That time, as they were away, they were Israelites. When they came in, they became Israelis. So the nomenclature changed. But you see, the temple, even when the building was destroyed, you still had the foundation so huge, so big, like a story building. By the side, you find Al-Aqsa Mosque. Then around the center, you have the Golden Mosque, Dome of the Rock. Then you also have Church for All Nations, where Jesus Christ was tried before crucified. Now, the Jews pray on the ground floor, placing their hands on the wall and doing their prayer. The Muslims will need to climb up the staircase of the foundation to pray up there. Now, who provides the security? Is the Israeli or the Israelis. And so, there were times the Israelis will feel, look, there are insecurity. You can't climb up. Now, there were also times the Israelis would want to climb up. Remember the Intifada of 2006 or 7?
I think it's 7 and 8. Yeah.
Yes. Now, the then Prime Minister, Minister of Culture then, Ariel Sharon or something, went up. Then they said, no, he had defiled it. And then there was crisis. So what I'm trying to say in a nutshell is that truly we've not seen the end of this crisis. How do you handle it? A situation where, okay, Christians are this way, Muslims, that spot where Abraham was supposed to have sacrificed his son Isaac. That is where you have the Al-Aqsa Mosque.
So many historical places.
So honestly, it's just going to be very, very big thing.
But for some, Mr. Ben, it's the political solution to all of this is the occupation, getting rid of the occupation, a two-state solution. That has always been the case since the 70s, and you had the Oslo Accords. Now you have this whole Abraham, the Abraham Accords right now, where Israel is trying to normalize relations with Saudi Arabia and all these other Arab neighbors to make sure that the situation is stabilized. But until that happens, the rest of the world is saying, listen, you can't have peace when one set of people feel occupied or feel under the thumb of of Israel, and that in itself is something that doesn't look likely to happen in the near future, because we've been talking about this two-state solution since Israel was created back in '48.
Absolutely, because truly, just like we started, my preamble, I said, what a fight cannot give, a handshake should be able to give. So a political solution has to come on board. And if you check, the two sides are so hardened and everyone standing on its own demand. So Israel is saying, you must pay for all of this.
But what would you say about, the activities of the world leaders now? I understand that the president of the US was in Israel, but he couldn't meet some certain kind of people. And what part do you think that world leaders need to play to make sure that we don't have a lot of people lose their life as a result of, some sort of retaliation in quote?
I think that hypocrisy or talking on both sides of the mouth shouldn't be. If you condemn, it shouldn't just stop at condemning. Can people move in? When you move in, should we be making the place more uncertain by shipment of more arms to those areas? And so we should be talking, seizing power and fire and talking. Now, what is the solution to this? Each side is claiming to having Jerusalem as the headquarter. And how do we solve this? If you go to Israel, virtually every embassy is not in Jerusalem, because it is still a thorny issue. Only a few.
I think it was recently, just declared. I think 2020. When Donald Trump recognized it as a new, because it used to be Tel Aviv before.
Exactly.
Before,
so
it was moved.
many of the embassies are around Tel Aviv, Kilsilia, and some other places like that, because the world is careful. Do we recognize Israel at the expense of the Palestinians? Do we recognize Palestinians at the expense of Israelis? But again, in Nigeria, there's something that we ought to know, especially Muslims and Christians. Sometimes we take side, we need to know history. There's this place you call Church of Nativity, where Jesus Christ was born. It's in Palestinian area, and quite a lot of other places that are of the Christian faith so important, they are in Palestinian areas. It's not as if there are no Christians in the Palestinian area. You remember Han Hashirawi and many other people like that, they all are from Palestine. So we should not just see, it's a war between Muslims and Christians. Because if you look at it, these people do not
unfortunately, for a lot of the wrong reasons, we're easily motivated to weigh in on the conversation because we feel as if we need to, because we're either Christians or Muslims, and that in itself is further aggravating the whole situation.
If you look at even PLO, it's a consortium, it's a group of various strugglers, let me put that way. They came in around 64 to form PLO, Palestinian
Right,
Liberation Organization.
And the interesting part is, a significant part of the Palestinian population is also Christian. So at the heart of the problem is usually about land and political freedom, not necessarily religion or any of those things.
I also find the Palestinians who are also lawmakers in the Knesset in Israel.
Exactly.
But we expect that people should use some of these people and see where we can.
Let's segue to other news stories, like this one on the front page of the Nation newspaper, where the finance minister Wale Edun is saying that 84 million Nigerians are living in poverty and it's not acceptable to this administration of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. And yesterday they launched the Renewed Hope conditional cash transfer to help augment and provide some sort of relief for the next 3 months for 15 million households. They're targeting 63 million Nigerians, according to the Humanitarian Affairs Minister, Betta Edu. What do you make of it? Another drop in the ocean?
In fact, that is if maybe quarter of a drop. Quarter of a drop.
That's so small.
In an ocean.
So you don't think 75,000 naira over the course of 3 months would do anything to help these
Abdullah,
Nigerians?
How much is a bag of rice? Okay, forget about rice. Go to the market to buy yam. If you're a family of 7 and you have 21,000 to take care of that. Okay, this is the yam. Where's the palm oil? Where is the salt?
Mr.
What
Ben,
about the transportation?
remember that saying, half bread is better than none. You strike me as somebody who would say that. Why don't you think that this half bread is not better than nothing?
Yeah, it's something as per a noun. It is something. But let us look at what we can do in this very program, when the rainy season was still very, very fresh. We said if you go into massive farming of beans, you cultivate, you harvest beans within how many months? What about maize? Within how many months? And if you are even going to do what you call this stoppage of importation, what is your own substitution that you have on ground? If you say you won't import rice, what have you substituted it with back home? So this money, let me tell you, if we were to sink it so much into agriculture, but agriculture is also not too safe because of what? The bushes are not safe. Why is it that we cannot engage all these farmers, all these herders? Let's see, if he tells the president, even kneeling down, oh boy, come. How do we solve this problem? But when you wake up, you go...
We have to go, unfortunately, Mr. Ben, but just a final thought, few seconds. The lawmakers, the National Assembly is apparently going ahead with buying lawmakers this 130 million luxury SUV. And the spokesperson of the House of Reps says, listen, it's not a status symbol. We're just buying it for oversight functions and nothing more. Nigerians are not particularly happy about it. Briefly, what is your take on that?
See, I think that they have overgauged the temperament of Nigerians, and so that it is just low there. They have seen that, after all, there can be a rebellion, there can be a revolution. But some of these things, as nauseating as they are, I'm telling you, this thing can bring a crisis. So when you feed families for 3 months, thereafter what? When you give just federal governments some hijack, a jack up in some of their allowances for about 6 months. Thereafter, what? So there is, in trying to solve some problems, will create problems. You take care of the federal workers. How have you taken care of those of the state? What about those of the local government? What about those in daily trust? From the organized private sector?
Unfortunately, we have to go, because
I love the fact that he mentioned daily trust. we feel
because you are part of the organized
right.
private sector.
Exactly.
Okay. Mr. Ben, as always, it's good to hear from you, and it's good to see you once again for the newspaper review. Thank you very much for your invaluable insight on today's headlines.
Thank you very much. My pleasure.
All right. This is where we call it today on today's edition of the program. Thank you most kindly, as always, for being a part of it. We do appreciate your time and company. Daybreak returns tomorrow, live and exclusive on Trust TV. My name is Abdullahi Ahmed. Thank you for watching the program.
And that's right. We thank you for being a part of the program. My name is Mardia Umar. Sport 360 is next on Trust Television. Stay with us.